You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. I'm Troy Singer here with my friend and co-host Bart Kaler. Today's topic, centralized, streamlined, and scalable, rethinking higher ed marketing. And with today's guest is Dave Gladson, Associate Vice President for Marketing at Point Loma Nazarene University. Dave brings a fresh, systems-focused perspective to higher ed marketing. And today, we'll unpack the strategic moves that they've made at Point Loma to evolve into a nimble, integrated, and impactful-driven marketing team.
Yeah, I really love spending time with Dave. He and I spent some time together at AMA. I was out on campus doing some AI training this summer, and I really always love his perspective on everything. He's a very pragmatic, practical guy, and I am too, and I like that. And so he leads the centralized, high-performing marketing team, and really they are operating in a hybrid remote model, which I think is really cool too. And he kind of discusses that and the why behind a lot of that, which I think is really good. And especially if you're trying to do that or convince that to happen at your institution, there's a lot of really good tips that he has in there as well. And under his leadership, the university's seen a 3.5 times increase in their market-driven revenue for grad programs. And they've made some really bold moves with consolidation and the model that they do and the way that they do their work. So really some good stuff here today and really pragmatic, practical applications.
And Bart, I'm surprised that you forgot to mention he gives a lot of tips to enhance the team's capabilities with AI.
Yeah, we get into a little geeking out with AI too, so that's fun.
Here's our conversation with Dave Gladson. Dave, we always start out our conversation with our guests by asking them to share something with us that would be deemed interesting or surprising that you may have recently learned that our audience might find meaningful or fun.
Well, in the random fact category, this week I learned that the MBA program has been around since 1908, which is much longer than I expected. In the more useful category, I learned that feta cheese and walnuts make a very good portobello stuffed mushroom filling.
It does sound great. That sounds chef-worthy, so I'm going to take advantage of that fact, and hopefully some of our other listeners do too. Dave, the title today is Centralized, Streamlined, and Scalable, Rethinking Higher Ed Marketing. Would love for you to share some of the successes that you are experiencing at Point Loma. Going to start out with what pinch points or opportunities help push Point Loma to move from a decentralized to centralized marketing structure?
Yeah, so the big push kind of came maybe about 9 years ago. We were looking to expand our graduate programming significantly. And, the marketing team was stepping into a situation where we had all these fragmented budgets across multiple departments. Every individual program had their own little budget. Some were way more than they needed. Some were way less than they needed. And they all had control over those budgets. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we were being asked to do some pretty significant growth on the grad side. And there was no budget for a centralized, high level awareness level campaign. Right. So, we had to live with that situation for a couple of years and show the data of conversion rates are terrible. If we're doing this fragmented marketing, there's a ceiling to how high we can get the conversion rates on these individual programs. It's really made the case that if you can get us one centralized budget and let us make the decisions, which programs actually need the budget, we need the promotion this year, which ones don't, which ones are doing just fine on their own, let us shift money around, let us fund an awareness level campaign out of that. We can give you results, and we've done that. Our conversion rates to enrollment on those people coming in from those campaigns is up, by 3.5 times. We went from a sub 2% conversion rate to enrolls that were significantly north of 7, and 8% within striking range now. So being able to show the impact of that and make the business case, it's very effective. It took a while. It took several years to get there. There were several steps along the way, but that's been the trajectory for kind of that centralization of that control.
Let's, before we go on further, let's just give everybody a little bit of context. So talk a little bit about the size of your team, talk about the size of the institution, because we have so many different sizes of organizations listening to this podcast that some people are like, oh, that sounds amazing. And, but I just want to make sure that there's context. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Point Loma Nazarene, we're in San Diego. At the time that was starting, we were around 4,000 total students. We're right on the cusp of 5,000 students today. And we're a team, at the time we were a team of maybe 12 people. Today we're a team of 18. And we have we've always sat in the center of the university, but we've really made that transition from a creative services team to a strategy team. But yeah, we sit in the middle. We work with undergraduate admissions. We work with graduate admissions. We work with alumni and advancement.
I like that. I appreciate you kind of giving us that context, because I think some of the questions that we'll kind of tease out a little bit is because I really want this to be practical for people who are listening. That's like, you know what, I feel what Dave just said about the fact that, hey, we've got all these little tiny programs that we're not sure, budgets are so scattered that there's not enough to do anything unless you put it all together. So how did those changes, how did you have to make changes to your team structure or the workflows, or where did you guys even start to make that work? Obviously it's over time, but just kind of give me some practical things that the listeners could say, hey, I could cobble this together and go make a pitch to my leadership.
Yeah, one of the first things that we did was working with accounting. It might sound silly, but getting the coding changed on those budgets, and it wasn't a shift all in 1 year. It went from individual budgets coded to those departments to kind of still bucketed in different program specific budgets, but all within a single cost center where we could do better splitting of costs across different program budgets. We lived with that for a couple years, and then we were able to finally make the shift into one central budget after proving the concept for a couple years. And a big part of it was finding the right partner. We did, when we were first started, when we had those fragmented budgets, our team was running a lot of the ads ourselves in-house. Right. When we really made that shift to a true integrated campaign, that's when we brought in a local agency to really provide that additional expertise. So our team does all the creative development, all of the messaging, but we're bringing experts who can do the media planning, some of that actual media execution, because those are skill sets that you really need experts at it. And it's easy to set up a Facebook ad. It's also easy to do it wrong. So
it's easy to spend a lot of money.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a really good point, because I liked what you said earlier about we kind of, we moved to a strategic team. Obviously you're doing creative, you're doing some of the strategy, you're doing a lot of the messaging and things like that. But it sounds to me like, especially what you just said there with moving some of the media buying, some of those very specialized skills, you're farming that out a little bit, or you're at least managing that out. So what do you think are some of those common misconceptions that people have about centralized marketing teams in higher ed? Because certainly I like the idea, and we've had Ethan Braden on the show before, and he's talked about, not being the short order cooks, but being the drivers of the messaging and of the mission and the way you communicate in the marketing. So kind of give me your take on some of that.
Yeah, because it's not a clean transition, especially when you're trying to make that shift. People are used to coming to you for a lot of highly specific requests and used to always being told yes. And when you start making that shift to well, actually, we can't help you in that way. Here's what I can offer you instead, or this is the new model. Yeah, it was a lot of tough conversations in those early years. It was a lot of long conversations and explaining why we're doing things differently. Or, even in the last couple of years, we've shifted a lot of that internal, maybe lower level creative development from designers doing that to here's your Canva template so you can do it yourself. Here's how you can self-service it. And I'd say 95% of people are actually happier with that in the end. Like they actually like having control. They'd rather be able to do it on the timeline that works for them, not wait for a designer to have time in their schedule and actually. So once you can get them over the hump of that initial shock, I think most people are actually happier with that model in the end. But it is a lot of conversations on the front end. You're investing less designer time, but you're investing a lot more emotional and management capital into bringing people along on that journey. And occasionally, you are filling a few requests here and there that probably aren't strategic, but you're still doing them anyway because you're managing relationships. But you're doing that strategically versus just whoever squeaks the loudest.
Yeah, I always call it the institutional Kinkos. It's like, hey, I want this to look prettier by Monday type of thing. And that, with Canva or Adobe XD or even with so many printers have online tools now that you can have, cards and letterhead and everything else printed on demand. It's so much easier to kind of have this centralized role that you guys have developed. That's great.
And I mean, part of making that work is accepting that not every piece is going to be perfect. Like not every piece is going to look exactly like what it would. If we were to do it ourselves, it would look different. And that's part of the trade-off. And we have to be okay with that. We can't have our cake and eat it too.
Exactly right.
Dave, if we could, we would like to change the topic to building culture without walls and the real results that you've experienced. And you conveyed to us earlier that as a source of team building, you are now in a hybrid workforce model and your full team never returned to the office after COVID. And we would like for you to explain what made that work so well.
Yeah, I'm the only one in the office here today. Most of the team is located in San Diego. We only have 3 truly remote employees. The other 15 of us are all located in the greater San Diego area. But if there's not a reason to come into campus, we don't come in. I have one in-person meeting later today that I'm prioritizing, so I came in for that and spent the whole day here. But and that's what I expect from my people, that if you don't need to commute, if there's not a reason to come in, don't come in. Prior to COVID, we did have one remote manager, so we had done a little bit of the work to kind of figure this out even before COVID, because we had somebody who was really awesome at their job and they needed to move to LA, and we certainly weren't going to lose them over a 2-hour commute. So we made it work. We figured it out. But I mean, as far as some of the practical things that we do that I think make it work for us, we have a very highly integrated team chat culture. Our team's on there all day. It's integrated with our project management platform, so that's a bonus. But I think it doesn't matter what specific platform you're using, just the fact that people are available all day long. So it's remote, but we do expect people to be online and working during core hours. So it's not remote and work whenever you want. It's work where you want, but the majority of your hours need to be during that core time. We've also done a lot of work to try to create, a lot of autonomy with all the roles. That I think that is one of the most important pieces, specifically for remote work, but probably for any truly successful team, is making sure that everyone understands how to make the roles autonomous as possible. If you need to have command and control over every decision that's being made, either you've got the wrong people or you're not defining success well. So that's probably the biggest one there.
Yeah, I like that because I think that, I've had a remote team for 15 years. And a lot of people are like, how do you do that? How do you make sure that people are doing what they want? It comes down to trust and getting the right people in the right seats too. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Good to Great, Jim Collins, with, get the right people on the bus and then get them in the right seat. And so if you've got a culture where you're not sure you can trust the people, you might not have the right people in your culture. And so I think it's one of those things. It takes a lot of trust. It takes the right kind of tools. You talked about your integrated chat. I mean, we've got a cloud-based project management system that, we've got people all around the world that are logging into that. And so, but as I think about this, and I know a lot of people are kind of struggling between the go back to work movement and sometimes senior leadership doesn't quite understand how it can work because they just, maybe boomers or Xers haven't experienced that in their career. So how do you kind of deal with that? And how do you make sure that, especially as it relates to the greater stakeholder group at the institution, how do they understand that, and what's your messaging to all that?
Yeah, I mean, as our leadership team, I do think we come in more than others, and I
Sure.
think that is probably part of what we do is we when someone needs to come in person, we take that hit and we come in and we do it in order to kind of protect that for the wider team. And I think that's part of our role as the leadership team, is to do that. Also, just being really communicative about successes, being proactive and making sure that we don't sit back and forget to tell those stories. Actively communicating what are those successes, making sure that we're reflecting credit down to everyone on the team who's doing those things that may not be as visible to folks in senior leadership, but like if we fail to do that, then we're going to lose it at some point. And then just from a purely practical perspective, in those conversations with HR and stuff, it's just showing that, I mean, people with marketing skills are highly transferable outside of higher ed. There's some roles at the university that only exist in higher ed, and you can make a case that people aren't going anywhere. If you've got people on your marketing team with good skills, there's every other industry out there can hire them. If somebody's good at doing higher ed email, they can also do banking services email. Yep. And if we're not going to pay top dollar, we have to give other benefits. So, I think just really making that case that the soft benefit of having that autonomy, having that flexibility to come in when it makes sense and not come in when it doesn't make sense, that's how we keep people. I think we just broke a streak of 18 months with no turnover on the team, which I think is pretty rare within the university. I think it's fairly rare within higher ed as well. And the person who left was, just they wanted to move to another part of the country, and they needed to do something different. So really just trying to make sure that we're making an environment where people don't leave until they have a really good reason to leave.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a really good point, because I mean, being in higher ed, and I hear this a lot. It's like, hey, we can't pay as much as these people demand sometimes. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier about, the media buyers, sometimes renting those people out is a more cost-effective way than hiring somebody that might have that top level skill set. But I think it also comes down to, I was talking to a client of mine, they're a rural university, and they were complaining about not having a hard time getting people to apply to their open position. And I was like, is it on site or is it, remote or hybrid? And they said, oh, it's on site. We don't allow anybody to do hybrid. And I'm like, well, that's part of your problem. You're going to have a hard time attracting really good talent to the middle of nowhere for the price that you're asking for. And so I think it's why we've got to think a little bit more creatively in higher ed marketing on how do we want to achieve what we're trying to do, and thinking outside the box sometimes I think is really helpful. So as you hear me say that, what are some of the wisdom that you would offer folks that maybe are on that place where either they or their leadership are saying, hey, we're convinced that the hybrid remote culture just isn't possible for our school? How do you kind of address that?
Yeah, I mean, I would challenge that thinking by saying, I think what you said before, that either one, do you actually have the right people in the roles, or two, are you measuring success for those roles well? Because if you're truly defining success for those roles and people know what they need to do in order to make the job function, there's no reason they should need to be sitting in a particular location to do that. If you need to meet with a particular person in person, obviously you do that. But the vast majority of the work, you're sitting in front of a computer. It doesn't matter where the computer is located if you've got the right people and you're defining success. I think the other one is just even when you offer people more money, do I want more money or do I want an extra hour back in my day? On the days when I don't commute, that's an hour back in my day that's an hour with my kids that I can't get any other way. There's no amount of money you can give me that's going to give me that hour of my day back. So I think understanding, particularly, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of a trope, but I think particularly the younger generations in our office really value that time, and they want to be able to have an awesome job that has an awesome trajectory, and then they want to put the job aside at the end of the day and do the things they want to do. And there's no way to replace that time. So people value that more highly than I think sometimes senior leadership expects.
No, I think that's excellent. I think that's a really, really good point.
Would like to switch the topic to AI. You've been a big proponent of generative AI within your marketing team. What excites you most about the potential of AI in higher ed marketing?
I mean, since I've been in higher ed marketing for 11 years at the university, and we have been understaffed that entire time. There has never been a day during my time at Point Loma that we have had enough people to do all of the things. I am not concerned about AI replacing any of our jobs right now because there's plenty of things that we could be doing that we're not. I look at this as a way that maybe we can finally catch up and actually do all of the things that would benefit the institution because we're doing our work more efficiently. We have more time to invest. I also just find it really cool. Every time that I get on with my bot and chat with her and ask her questions, I find my thinking challenged, whether it's because it brings a new idea that I wasn't expecting or whether it's because I have to think through why that's actually wrong and come up with a good argument for it. Whether the bot is right or wrong, I feel like I learn something every single day and it makes me a better thinker.
I want to point that out because I think that's something that I've been trying to talk a lot about in my training. And full transparency, we at Kaler Solutions did some AI masterclass training with Point Loma. But I think that I've been trying to help people understand that these are collaborative bots that can help you and enhance the work that you're doing. They're not like Google or some other program you're used to putting something in a box and hitting OK and getting the answer. You have to be open to collaboration with this. And I love what you just said that, maybe it's helping you think of things you hadn't thought before, or it's challenging you in your thinking. So what other practical ways is your team currently using AI to boost either your creativity or create some efficiency or enhance your workflows? I mean, I know a lot of what we talked about. I know what you and I talked about offline, but I would love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just is the things you'd expect, getting a head start on an article. I've got this idea, and you ask it to frame it out into an outline, and you don't ask it to write the article, but you ask it to get you 80% of the way there, and then you can take that outline and finish putting the touches on it. When I've got a strategy question, I could go to my group chat and I could start a long conversation where we kind of debate it back and forth, or I can go to my bot and I can have a quick, 4 or 5 minutes Socratic conversation back and forth and kind of talk through my ideas with the bot and understand, okay, this idea doesn't hold up. And I can put that idea aside before I go spend 30 minutes with my team talking it through. Yeah. So it really just accelerates some of those learnings, or gives me a chance to test out an idea and here's why that idea is bad. And now I can move. Now I can put that one aside. I've tested it. I feel confident it was a bad idea. And it's not sitting there in the back of my brain bothering me all day. What if we tried this? Things like testing copy variations before putting them out there in the public. We might have standardly come up with 3 variations of copy, but why not 5? Why not 10? We could put them out there in the wild and just kind of see which ones perform best on Meta and then adjust a week later. Or we could put those copy variations in the bot and say, from the perspective of a 14-year-old, which one of these is likely to be the most attractive and why, and do that first round of testing before we even spend any money on the ad. it just accelerates that learning process.
Yeah, and I was impressed when I was on campus just with your leadership and the leadership there at Point Loma of just encouraging everyone to kind of explore and play. That day that we were together, there was a lot of playing happening. I mean, yes, we had our use cases that were serious, that was, we were trying to move, mission critical things forward. But I think that the idea of play with AI is so important because you discover new things that, you're not going to necessarily use that for a piece of marketing, but it does allow you to open up your mind to say, oh, there's a lot of creative ways. So maybe speak to that for a second.
One of the initial reactions so often from people who are just trying it for the first time is like, oh, look, that's wrong about the answer. And then they want to put it aside. And that's easy to do when it's like you're asking the bot to give you copy for an email or something that you're thinking about using in public. But when you're doing something fun like, hey, turn myself into an action figure, and you have to go through 8 or 10 iterations of it to like, oh my gosh, I look like a clay lump. That's terrible. How can I get this better? And you've got this motivation to kind of push through the first 2 or 3 bad iterations to get to a better one. You get more comfortable with that. It's easier to test that on something that's fun and motivating than when you're like, your first use case of trying this new tool is write email copy that you're going to send to the world, and if it's wrong, you're going to get 4 people responding back telling you why your email's here.
Yeah. Or you're under deadline, or you've got other things that are critical. Yeah, totally get that.
Yep.
So Dave, I know you and I and Troy, we all attended the AMA conference, and I know I'd led a couple sessions on AI. I think you sat in on maybe 1 or 2 of them, and you probably sat in on a few other ones. And so, what did you hear or sense from your peers of what's going on in the industry as it comes to AI adoption? I mean, I've been seeing all kinds of things. I'm just curious from your seat, what did you kind of observe, and what have you been hearing?
Yeah, I think the most positive takeaway I felt coming away from that is that it's so easy to feel like you're behind the curve. I get way too many newsletters, and you kind of, the way you see things talked about in the articles, it can feel like you're so far behind. And I think after talking with my colleagues, like we're right in the middle of the pack where we should be. We're not leading the pack. That's probably not the kind of university we are, and that's okay. We're not going to be the most innovative team on the entire planet, but we're also not way behind. We're doing the right experimentation. We're doing the right learning. We're figuring out what works. We're not necessarily launching a ton of huge products, and that's okay, because things are changing so fast right now. It's okay to kind of be experimenting, and our team's really into GPT right now, but in a year from now we might be on Gemini. So it's okay if we're not pushing out tons of brand new products. We're in a good spot, and I felt a lot of confidence coming out of AMA in that regard.
That's good, because I think you bring up a really good point that being agile in the world of AI, I think is so critical right now. And I think that you're right in the sense of kind of figuring it out, understanding that, hey, everybody's figuring this out. I keep telling people, it's like, look, I'm only a couple years ahead of everybody else. I mean, this has just been 3 years since ChatGPT has been out. So, everybody take a chill pill, because we're still at the early part of this. And so, but as you talked earlier about, some practical advice for schools who are looking to kind of get into that centralized role, and even you kind of touched on a little bit about the remote. What would you say about some of the schools that are maybe hesitant to lean into the AI tools, or what kind of advice would you be offering them to kind of get started to move forward a little bit more confidently?
I mean, even if it's only 5% of your day to do a little experimentation, set aside 15 minutes in the morning to take one of the problems that was on your plate to solve later, and play around with it in your AI of choice, and see how you can get there. I think you'll very quickly find you'll at least get to time equity, if not time savings, or it may take the same amount of time, but you're going to get a better product. I think you'll very quickly get there. You're talking about a week or 2. Do 30 minutes to an hour of learning of how to set up your first prompts well, so that you're asking good questions, so that you're making sure that your AI is helping you organize your thoughts, so you're not just asking it for a magic answer. Yeah, if you ask it for a magic answer, the answer's probably going to suck. Give me a perfect email. doesn't know you. It doesn't know your writing style. It doesn't know your university very well. Figure out your version of having a conversation so that your AI is helping you be you better versus asking it to solve magic questions.
Yeah, I like that. And I love the fact that you're talking about trying to lean into it and failing forward with it as opposed to perfection. That's one of the biggest things I see too many schools focusing on right now, especially even down in the marketing department. It's like, well, we're waiting to see this, or we're trying to figure it out, or we're putting a policy together, or I mean, policy committees are going to kill AI adoption. I'll just tell you that right now. And so I love your comment about let's experiment, 5%, let's figure some stuff out, just play. That's where we need to be right now. So thanks, Dave. I appreciate that.
Dave, for our last question to help close our conversation, we would really like to know if a marketing leader is thinking of restructuring the team, what's the first step that you would recommend them do?
It's easy to try to build around the people you have, but I think it's so critical to be building for the team you need. You're either going to make the role funky to fit the person to make them happy, or build the role you want, still let the person you have fill it, but be really clear about what the role really is and what's out of the role, so that when you do have turnover in the future, as you're like, don't create a problem for yourself to have to undo when people leave. Like, build the roles you want and be willing to let people kind of do that, plus the things they're also good at, and be comfortable with that. But don't cement odd structures into your office just because that happens to be the people that were on the team when you walked into a new hire or something.
That is wonderful. Again, everyone, we've been speaking with Dave Gladson, Associate Vice President for Marketing at Point Loma Nazarene University. Dave, for anyone that would like to learn more or just connect with you, what would be the best way or your preferred way for them to do so?
I'm on LinkedIn, so I will happily take a connection request from anybody in higher ed or higher ed marketing. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Very good. Well, thank you for all that you've shared with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
Wonderful. Bart, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I really appreciate Dave being on the call today. I've always enjoyed spending time with Dave, and I really respect what he and the team there at Point Loma have been doing and what they continue to do. I think that just so much of what he talked about is so practical, just being able to really look at, I mean, I love just the approach that they started with. It's like, hey, this isn't working, guys. Let's speak up and figure out and talk with accounting to say, hey, can we track this to show that it's not working? Because I think too many times people just do what they're told to do. And if we're going to be strategic and we want to be seen as strategic marketers, we have to sometimes speak up and say things that are obvious that nobody else is seeing. And I really like the fact that you guys saw that. You saw this doesn't make sense. What we're doing doesn't make sense. And so they went from a decentralized to a centralized marketing team. I think that's a lesson for all of us, is that if you see something, say something, because that's what we need to be doing. We don't have the luxury to just punch in and punch out every day. We got to look out for each other. And I think the idea of really being able to also figure out what's going to work. If remote teams work for your college, and right now you have a lot of naysayers on that, make a case and persuade them of why this is going to be good, why it's going to be better for your talent, why it's going to retain talent, why it's going to allow you to get better talent. Again, it goes back to the fact that if we just complain about things, but we're not willing to put our neck out there and say something, shame on you. And then finally, I just really enjoyed the conversation about AI. I could have talked the whole time about AI, but I know that sometimes people are like, we don't need to hear Bart talk about AI again. But I really enjoyed kind of spending time with Dave and the team there, and just kind of seeing the light bulbs go off, and just seeing and hearing how it continues to be a big part of their lives and what they're doing. And so, Dave, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to see you, brother.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
For our listeners, we appreciate you joining another episode of The Higher Ed Marketer. And if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with a colleague and follow us on LinkedIn at The Higher Ed Marketer. The podcast is brought to you by Kaler Solutions, your trusted partner in higher ed enrollment strategy and mission fit marketing.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com. your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.